Okay, I don't have anyone else in the waiting room at the moment, so we'll get started, but I will just continue to admit people if people are joining a couple of minutes late. So welcome everyone to our webinar on managing back to school. It's lovely to see everyone here. For those of you that don't know, we are from the Keeping Well NCL Hub, which is a wellbeing service for NHS and social care staff within the NCL. So it's really nice to have you with us here today. And just to do a technical check, can everyone hear me okay and see the slides all right? Just kind of comment in the chat if you can't do that.
Yeah, fine.
Brilliant. Okay, so my name's Debbie and I'm an assistant psychologist in the Hub. And before I hand over to our webinar leaders today, I just want to run through some general housekeeping rules. So please keep yourselves on mute during the presentation, just to reduce background noise. There will be some moments of discussion where you can pop yourself off mute and speak if you'd like to do so. It would also be really nice to have cameras on if you feel comfortable, just so we can see who we're speaking to. Sorry, just going to admit someone there. And as a reminder, the webinar is being recorded, so it will be uploaded to our website for other staff within NCL who maybe couldn't attend today, for them to watch in the future. We will be using breakout rooms and Mentimeter. If you've not used that before, we'll explain that later on, just to have some discussion points, but the breakout rooms won't be recorded. You're also welcome to use the chat function, or as I mentioned earlier, take yourself off mute to speak if you'd like to add to one of the discussions. We will be discussing some topics that may be quite difficult or sensitive to talk about, so please only share what you feel comfortable with. And if you do find these discussions difficult, please take a break if you need to. You can turn your camera off, step away from the computer, or do whatever you need to make yourself feel comfortable. If you would like some further support from our hub, get in touch via email or through the website, and those details are on the last slide. And those slides will be emailed to you after the webinar is finished, so you'll have all the detail on there. Okay. Just for those of you that have just kind of joined with us, we're just going over some housekeeping rules there. So just to ask that you'd pop yourself on mute, just to reduce some background noise, and cameras on if you feel comfortable. And I'll now hand over to Sam and Ola, who are leading today's webinar, and let them introduce themselves.
Okay, so I'm Ola Ajala. I'm a systemic family therapist and a psychiatric nurse. I'm currently working at the Keeping Well Hub NCL.
And hello, I'm Sam. I'm a family therapist too, and I work over in the other side, South London and Maudsley. And yeah, lovely to meet you all.
So, so the aims for today's discussions, this webinar, we want to consider what the experience of returning to school might be for families, given the challenges of the past year. Also want to think about how we can balance our roles and responsibilities, so our professional caring responsibilities alongside our personal caring responsibilities. We want to provide a space for reflection and exploration, and then maybe think about some guidance on how we can better navigate this time. So just as a bit of an intro, COVID-19 has caused big changes in our lives. And while some people may have adapted well to these changes, others would have struggled to adapt. The disruption to the normal routines, the social distancing, mask wearing, the regular testing, self-isolation, and the general uncertainty may have been quite overwhelming for some people. And now, given the drive to return to normal, despite COVID-19 remaining very present in our lives, it's important to consider how this continues to affect and impact us and our families, particularly at this time when children are expected to return to school and we're approaching the winter season. So for care professionals who have personal caring responsibilities, this may be a particularly difficult time. It's helpful to hold this in mind as a manager or a colleague of someone who might have these responsibilities. It's also important to bear in mind that there's no right way to manage the challenges, and everyone's challenges might be different because everyone's been impacted in a different way. Some people might have felt safe and been able to enjoy their time, whilst for others, it may not have only been challenging, but it might have been quite traumatic. People who already face challenges in their lives may have had these challenges amplified. So it might be helpful to consider the various worries you and your families might have about the return to school. The worries might include potential exposure to the virus and transmitting it to vulnerable loved ones, the impact on their education, upcoming assessments they might have, problems with bullying or friendships, or transitions such as starting a new school, college, or university. If you're caring for young people with additional needs such as special educational needs, disabilities, autism, or mental health issues, or even a combination of these, this will likely exacerbate the challenges and mean that you need additional support caring for them. Next slide, please. So I mean, Sam, I'm wondering what are some of the challenges that or concerns that you might have in relation to children going back to school?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a massive shift, isn't it? Everybody sort of shifted to face COVID, and everybody did that in sort of their own way and in different ways. And I think also schools really reacted in a huge diversity of different ways. Some schools could provide much more, others much less. I think there has been a real noticeable shift as far as I'm concerned. I mean, my boys are very young, so they've been at nursery. We've actually been in 2 nurseries, so it's been really interesting to see how different staff have managed. But you can, the anxiety was palpable with some of the staff. They were sort of coming in to very early years wearing masks and being very rigid. And I think I was really interested in that sort of effect in the way youngsters interact. You could see at the playground, that there were, when things started to open up, you could see the way young people played with each other was really different. There was one girl who was like, I remember really strongly, she was like really like wanting everybody else to stay away from her and getting very, very vocal in that. I think for me personally, the challenges has just been that sort of, our work has been relentlessly busy and relentlessly stressful. And it's sort of like now the team is a little bit exhausted. and then that sort of now continues. I think particularly people working in mental health, but really in all sectors of care and education, they've been stretched and they'll continue to have these challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was really difficult trying to manage the homeschooling alongside working from home. That was really difficult. But I think going forward, one of the things that I really worry about and think about is, should one of my children need to isolate or stay at home for a couple of weeks, depending on what's happening at the school, how, will there be as much flexibility as there was sort of last year as there is now? Because there is this expectation, that you're going back to the office and you're going back to normal and you're working as you were before, but things aren't normal. So what happens, how lenient will my employers be, and how supportive will they be if I need that sort of time or that flexibility?
Yeah, I really hear that. And I remember periods of having to lock down with both boys. And I mean, I'm in a 2-parent relationships, so even that was struggle with both of us working. Yet you couldn't work and look after 2 3-year-olds at the same time. But I think I completely hear you, Ola. I think my work was sort of flexible with that, and there was an acceptance that this is the way it is. But yeah, you're right. How long can that go on? And our expectations going to change? That's a concern. We thought what we would do is, because you can hear from us later on a bit more, but what we thought we would do is break you up into some breakout rooms so that you can have a bit more of a discussion with each other, and really connect on some of those.
Sorry, Sam, I think at this point we wanted to use Mentimeter.
Oh, we are, aren't we?
Invite people
we can
to
break
join
out
this discussion and
break
share
out
their
rooms
own
later.
challenges.
Let's share with the whole group. If you're brave enough to speak on screen, please do unmute yourself and speak. We've got the option of using this comments here with the messages, or you can use, as Ola and Debbie were saying, Mentimeter.
Yeah, I'll just explain Mentimeter for those of you that haven't used it before. All this fancy tech that's come in. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can copy and paste the details into the chat. But you just need to visit menti.com, which I'm going to pop in the chat now, and enter in that code that I've entered there as well. And then that will take you to the question, which is, what are some of your challenges or worries regarding the return to school? And then you can just type in your answers there, and that's anonymous, and then it'll come up and we can have a discussion around that. Or as Sam and Ola said, feel free just to enter into the chat or take yourself off mute if you'd like to. But there's the question in there as well.
Yeah, so open to you really about, personally, what are some of the challenges or worries that you've had, people that you know, what have been the main sort of challenges and worries there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I don't mind starting.
That'll be helpful.
So I work full time. Luckily, I'm able to do a few days from home and then the rest of the time in the office. I've got a 9-year-old who's at primary school, and my 11-year-old has just started secondary school. I think the main challenges for me is that there is now this constant background anxiety that what if one of them does get COVID, and then they're having to sort of stay off school and isolate. And I think that's from a practicality perspective, as well as the effects that will have on their education. I mean, touch wood, so far so good, but that's always on my mind. And then also, I mean, I don't know whether this is relevant to this sort of chat, but juggling a full-time job, juggling homework, especially where perhaps one of the children is less enthusiastic than the other, feeling like I've always got to keep on top of him and make sure that everything's ready for the next day, when perhaps those are responsibilities that I should be letting him do himself, but I know if I do, then they won't get done, and then he'll get into trouble for not doing the homework. So it's kind of the worries of COVID and what comes with that, and then also the sort of juggling of all the things that come with having children at school.
Yeah, and I guess they're concerns that would always be there, isn't it? But that, like, about boys doing homework and how much you input and how you can juggle all the things, but it seems that they're really intensified by both the situation, but also that background worry that you're talking about, that sort of continually, well, I don't know if you find yourself thinking, Helena, can I commit to this thing at work? Because actually next week I might not actually be able to physically be here. And having to sort of just, you have to be on call in a way that you might be in before COVID, isn't it? Things can happen, but it's so much more likely that's going to happen, and it will be a 10-day stint at home. You're
just waiting. I mean, even we're scheduled to go to Alton Towers next weekend with my brother, and the kids were all going together, and now we're just thinking, are we even going to get there? There's no petrol. Is one of us going to get COVID? Like, things just aren't normal anymore. You can't sort of look forward to those things as you used to. You're on sort of tenterhooks, just thinking, is something going to happen?
I mean, as you was talking, Helen, and you was talking about sort of homework and sort of managing that, I find myself thinking about one of the things I worry about, which is, the amount that they've missed, and how much they've got to catch up on. And the pressure that might be putting on the children, and
Yeah.
you're pressurizing them to do well, and it's all a bit much.
Yeah. And then you've got to fit in all the normal duties as well, sort of housework and activities, and sometimes it can just feel like you're going to explode.
Yeah, my brother and his wife are certainly feeling that at the moment, because they used to have lots of extracurricular stuff that they did, and they've got 3 children, and they're doing stuff, I don't know, 3-4 times a week, and it is just going from what they were having to then all of a sudden all of this, so many things to do.
Yeah,
it's just so much. And
I mean,
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, something that I personally struggle with is that I'm quite a routine focused person, and I'm good when the routine is normal, but when the routine is threatened or gets disrupted, my daughter fell over at school last week and had quite a nasty injury, so I had to drop work. We ended up in A&E. It's all good, and she hasn't been able to do her normal activities and things. That's when I start to get stressed. So COVID's been particularly difficult because there's this constant threat of things not working as they should be working.
Yeah, and having to go to A&E.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Grab a picnic and off we go.
Some people are also resonating with what you're saying as well, Helen, because someone's saying about that unpredictability of the situation ahead. I think that's similar to what you mentioned, isn't it? That sort of being on tenterhooks or have that background anxiety. But yeah, the unpredictability of making plans. Can we even plan this thing, or do we have to have a plan B?
I saw someone mention something about burnout and that filtering into your, I think, home. Yeah, into your home.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
burnout filtering to the home, irritability. Someone saying
how we support young people, to manage this, if we're feeling like this and we're struggling in this way, what impact does this have on the young people? I see someone talking about their son not being able to cope with change anymore, and things that are happening.
And then that idea is, there's little support, and I think that's what I've really heard, that some people are. It seems real. There's a real difference between how schools are managing and how different services are managing in different parts, and it's really sad to hear that. Yeah, look, 2 years behind now, and this father doesn't feel that there's the support there. And yeah, we are familiar with that, isn't it? That school. And with the sort of routines at school and with everybody there, the child holds it together, but brings the safety and familiarity of home where the behaviour then deteriorates.
Okay.
Having enough energy to be present for the children after work, or feeling exhausted, that's a common theme that's coming up. There's one at the top there as well, Debbie. What was that one? There was one. Oh no, it wasn't. It was just having enough energy to be actually present. You mentioned that as well, Helen, isn't it? That all the homework, all of the sort of things that you have to do alongside your job, which I think most people's jobs have got harder, right? Hands up whose workload has increased, because
but also your job at home is, would have gotten harder possibly.
Yeah. Missing school, bringing the virus home, child having to isolate, and the effect of that. It's a tricky one, isn't it? One child, especially you've got more than one child, because one child isolates, and then it's likely that the other child is then going to isolate at some point, but only when you get the positive result would you start that isolation. So your isolation can be fairly long if you're unlucky with that. I know I saw a headmaster today as I was walking around a school, and he was saying how actually what they experienced was that the families with just a single child at home seemed to struggle a lot more during COVID, and actually his idea was, actually that they should be a group that schools should be opening to. So his school, they made special efforts to get those children into school. But I think that's really what I'm sort of thinking partly about this this child developing more tics and deteriorating rapidly, what sort of support actually, what sort of support can be given from schools, and how we get that. So maybe we can look at that a little bit later on.
Hi, can I say, my daughter struggled going into school before lockdown, and we just turned a corner and she managed to go in for all her GCSEs and did amazingly well considering she hadn't been at school much.
Well, yeah.
But then those year 11s had 14 weeks off.
Yeah, of course.
On top of what the lockdown. And now she can't go into college. She can't physically leave the house. So I think something should have been done about that long holiday that you're naturally given, but maybe shouldn't have had at the end of a lockdown. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I share your thoughts actually, because I remember thinking to myself when the summer holidays came up, that should they still have this long period, you know, from school as they would normally be, and as they've missed so much already.
And those changes, those transitions across, you know, that particular one from GCSE to what do they call it, higher education or whatever. It's a big shift, and to have to do it punctuated by so many sort of spaces. It's hard, isn't it? Hard to get that momentum and keep it up. And it sounds like from what your description is, there was the momentum there, and then it sort of stopped, and then she sort of got it back up. She did the best she could, and actually did really well. But then it sort of actually feels maybe it's exhausted by all having to sort of change gear all the time. And it is really changing gear, isn't it?
I just wanted to add as well, if you just think about some of the sort of challenge, you know, talking about challenges and the loss that people would have experienced. And when we're thinking about these transitions that you're talking about, you know, often there is almost like a ritual or some sort of celebration that happens to celebrate some of these transitions. So, you know, for children going into secondary school or starting college or university, you might have a prom, there might be a holiday, you know, there are things that we naturally do. And I think, you know, that could be experienced as a loss for some people, the opportunity to say goodbye to friends and teachers that you would have missed out on, you know, the planning for the holidays that might have happened for some young people. So these things
even getting your results.
Yeah.
Because they were emailed.
Yeah.
So you would have your results day, you know, and go and celebrate with your friends, but those results were emailed to you in your bedroom on your own.
Yeah.
And you can talk about them, can't you, with each other? And you can talk about the next place you're going to, and you can have those conversations which happen naturally when you're face to face with people, and they happen they're less easy to initiate on a group chat or they're a bit more clangy, aren't they? Like it doesn't spontaneously come up so much.
Yeah. Can we just move to the next slide? I mean, I think we've covered some of this already, but just thinking about the challenges. So as we said, the loss and bereavement that some people might be experiencing, and we've lost, you know, that could be also, you know, loss of support. You know, it might be that for somebody who was engaged in additional support, you might have had that stopped or put on hold. You know, you might not have been able to see significant family members, you know, like grandparents, for example. And then for people who have challenging experiences at home, you know, these may have been exacerbated. We have data that says that, you know, from some domestic violence charities, they reported more than 500% increase, you know, in their phone calls for some people. The uncertainty of, you know, not knowing, and all these changes that are happening rapidly. We talked about transitions already. Sorry, just bear with me, I lost my screen. And for young people in particular, friendships, you know, can be so important to them, and the disruption in that, you know, being isolated at home, you know, some young people may not have had the opportunity to see friends. And I think this whole sort of COVID situation, the very nature of it, you know, it's a contagious disease or that could be something that could instigate bullying in young people. And then for some people, actually, they felt safer at home. People who were shielding, for example, they would have felt safer at home. There might be people who have additional needs that are, where their needs are better met at home. So now that there's this drive to going back outside and going back to normal, actually, that's the challenge for some people. It's going back to normal.
Yeah, I'd add as well, Ola, just on the loss as well, that quite a lot of people I know have actually lost functioning, like through COVID, through long COVID or whatnot. Actually quite a lot of staff, they in a subtle way have less energy, or actually one person I know is, not actually can't work because he's been, he's now got heart problems as a result of, what you'd probably call long COVID. And a lot of people, I think health and social care have been somewhat protected by the loss of earnings, but there's a lot of people, isn't there, who just actually don't now haven't had an income for such a long time, or have had to shift, and just to sort of add that onto that common theme of loss for everybody.
Yeah, and I wanted to add with the uncertainty as well. I mean, that can kind of stretch out to, because families will be navigating across different systems and guidelines. There's the school, there's your workplace, different places, different organizations will have their own sort of systems and guidelines in place. And so, that will be a worry, a challenge for people. In addition, there might be different beliefs held within family systems in relation to, say, vaccinations or vaccinating the children, for example, or even just following the rules and the guidelines that the government have suggested. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide.
Right, this is really now where we're going to have breakout rooms. And we thought, that it would be good to discuss really how you were all managing to balance the different roles and responsibilities. And we thought this would be better. These breakout rooms aren't recorded. Oh, you're giving the next slide away, Debbie. We're not recording these breakout rooms, whereas so you can sort of have a more open conversation. I think 10 minutes probably, we can still do that, Debbie, right? 10 minutes sort of just really to discuss with each other about some of the challenges you're experiencing juggling, and when we come back as a group, you have option to feedback some of the themes if you want. We're not going to go through each group and insist that a representative feedback, but you have the opportunity to feedback. And again, we'll have the chat there, we'll have the screen, and we'll have the mini mentor as well function. So yes, 10 minutes, and Debbie will split you up into groups so you can get to know each other and chat about those things. Hello there. Nice to see there's some smiles when people are coming back. That's good. We hope that it would be that sort of experience, and actually you'd get a chance to offload a bit perhaps, and actually part of this presentation is about how important it is to keep the conversation going about these challenges.
And acknowledge what's happened, without dwelling on it. But actually, I think it's important that we do acknowledge the enormity of what we've been experiencing this past year.
Certainly in terms of when I've had my hardest times at work, when I've actually shared that with colleagues, it's always been helpful. I mean, I think you need to choose the right person to share with, and it depends on your team, isn't it? You need someone that's going to boost you. But what things does anybody want to sort of share? Any of the themes that came up, or any really interesting points that people want to make at this stage?
We couldn't actually see the questions, so we both sort of all chatted about sort of what's happened and sort of how we've all found it individually, and with some all got different sort of family backgrounds and kids and stuff, and it was just really interesting listening to what people have struggled with, what's been the challenges and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, I remember when I came back from my lockdowns, I've almost felt like hugging one of the duty doctors who I barely knew, just the fact of seeing somebody that is, in a team. And I think I'm looking at the IKEA drawers in the background there with you, Steve, and wondering, actually some people are at home for long periods of time, and it's it's very different way of working, isn't it? I don't know if that
It
came
is.
up in your discussion, but
No, a lot of us work from home or part-time from home. I'm very varied. It could be a whole week at home. It could be one day, just depends. But yeah, my office is in my son's bedroom.
yeah, I like it. Very colourful.
I wonder if there were any sort of points or any discussions around what people have found helpful or particularly unhelpful in the past year.
Well, can I mention something? Just something that was mentioned. I just think some people might be experiencing now working from home. You know, literally, because I have not been expected to. I've been expected to go in rather than work from home. Although I did work from home in the lockdown after Christmas. But yeah, I think there is that time between work and home where I'm actually commuting.
Yeah.
And there was observation that actually, if you're working from home, you don't actually have that downtime between work and home. So you have to really switch, you know, your roles and responsibilities, like just like that. You know, you have to sort of, you know, and like you have to go instantly from being work person to parent. And I think that is really challenging without
Definitely.
the downtime and the time.
And without the physical movement, because actually in the commute or in the journey, you're physically moving, aren't you? And there's exactly what you say, there's a boundary that you pass. You leave the office, you leave that, and often people, you know, use that symbolically as a way of leaving all of the stuff that happens in the day, of leaving that there at work and transitioning between a different identity. Like you say, you may have been staring at your four walls and things in your house whilst doing your job, and they sort of become all merged in.
Yeah.
And without that transition, that's a really good point, Kathy. How have you found anything helpful with that yourself?
No, I thought that really struck me when having a conversation earlier in our group. But what I found in terms of managing different roles and responsibilities is just actually in a way that I have really had to be quite firm or sort of push back on sort of like, because I'm expected to go in, even though I'm an admin and I can do everything from home. It's still just a requirement of the service, so I can be back up maybe for reception and that kind of a thing. And I just found that in terms of, you know, managing my roles and responsibilities, I'm a single parent. I've only got one child, and he's a teenager, and you know, when he's it's not like and he hasn't had any anxiety or anything. So in a way, I've had it easy because he just wants to be plugged in on his screens with his friends. But when it was school at home, I really had to fight and sort of hold the line about needing to be parent at home for when he was required to be at home for school. And I really had to, you know, pull out all the stops to enable it. And I felt, I don't know, it's hard to describe how I felt about that, but it's in terms of like, I was trying to be like a responsible grown up, and it just felt like it wasn't really understood, like that my need to be at home.
I'm really hearing that, and also I'm hearing that from work, and that actually felt a bit unhelpful, because you couldn't actually see perhaps why you would be needing to be there face to face if your job could be done remotely. And it doesn't sound like you've had it that easy, Kathy. Thank you so much for sharing that. It doesn't really sound as though you've had it that easy. And I wonder if that's another common thing, that, you know, we look around us and think, oh, you know, so and so has it really hard. I can't complain that much. Or I can't like, I've got it better than so many other people. I wonder if that affects how we do think about that. But thank you for sharing, Kathy. I think that's really
just conscious of time, so I think we'll move on.
We'll move on, because some of that's in the next slide, which you had a sneaky peek at already.
Yeah.
Anybody know this term burnout? Compassion fatigue, I think, is it being rebranded? I guess burnout, when something's burnt out, you don't really. It's very hard to put it back together again, isn't it? There's an idea of it being done, but actually, compassion fatigue is actually, it can rest and it can come back.
I wanted to just, in relation to something somebody said earlier on in Mentimeter, and, you know, burnout, and then I think the comment was something along the lines of when it starts to affect your home life. And, you know, I found myself sort of really thinking about that. And I think for me, that's the sort of boundary, you know, when it starts to impact my personal life, my home, my children, you know, I think for me, that's a real indication of it's time, you know, this isn't okay. And this is something needs to be done here. And it's time to kind of think about support. So just thought it might be helpful to sort of share that, you know, about us kind of thinking about our boundaries in that way. But sorry, go on, Sam.
And exactly, and that is it. This is not okay. Realizing and recognizing and speaking it, and actually having, like Kathy was saying, having to actually stand up and say, you know, having to sort of fight your corner and your family's corner, and completely, yeah. Our children are so precious, aren't they? And so important that I was saying in the break how actually my boundaries between work and home got so much better when I became a parent, because they need to be. You can't, you know. Children pick up that, don't they? They pick up and they resonate with you. So yeah, with this, if you look at the bottom of this slide, you may have heard of mass latch. There's a mass latch burnout inventory. You can Google that, and you can actually, it's like a multifaceted thing. It's developed by psychologists, I think. So you take all these things with a pinch of salt, but it's actually quite useful because it's got different domains, and you could actually test. You can do it a few times. You shouldn't be able to have to pay. There are some you have to pay for, but some are free. So have a look at that, because it interestingly gives you advice on what to do depending on which domain that you might be at risk in, and it breaks it down like psychology often does in brilliant ways, in sort of, you know, you're at low risk, high risk, and actually things are really bad. And
next slide, please. Sorry.
We're running for time. So here we have basically just, yeah, these three domains, which, you know, decrease feelings for personal accomplishment. So feeling, you know, well, anyway, let's just very quickly whiz through these things. The idealized values of what we can achieve and what we can do here in this orange box, how we can reframe that really is having reasonable expectations of ourselves and being accepting of our vulnerabilities. I'm just going to read these through because we're running short for time. Accepting the high workload, not wanting to let the side down. This is a common thing among healthcare workers, and it's good. You know, we need to support each other, but also we need to be clear about what we can do and set our boundaries according to what we can do, not some idealist sort of idea that we have to, you know, that we just have to sort of keep on keeping on. One of the biggest things for burnout is that often people will double their efforts, or they'll work longer and stay longer hours, and actually this makes it worse. In fact, what one of the a big remedy for it is actually for shortening the length of time we are at work and creating space and taking breaks. The high responsibility for change, often we are invited to take lots of responsibility for change, especially when there's a lot of uncertainty, and just trying to remind ourselves and stay humble and accepting responsibility for what we do have responsibility for. Avoiding work tasks, avoiding work, being very late for work. This is in the domain of sort of decreased feelings of personal accomplishment. We spoke about this, didn't we, Ola, about actually how you name it, how naming it can really change that, finding people that might support you with that, and actually naming it and getting support. Even the fact of sometimes saying, acknowledging it to another person or to another colleague or to a friend, that in itself, for me at least, really does lift and really can move things, as opposed to this sort of keeping quiet and keeping your head down and not wanting to burden other people.
Sorry to stop you, Sam. I think we need to move on.
Yeah, so but just do look up mass latch, because there's lots of further stuff that you can do for that. And let's have the next slide.
So, I mean, I'm not going to read through these because you are going to get these slides, but it's really just trying to kind of emphasize the importance of you looking after yourselves, you know, in order for you to be able to look after your families or even the people that you support in your professional lives. You have to look after yourself first. You know, you can't look after others if you're not okay yourself. So, you know, it's important to kind of do nice things for yourself you know, keep up with the basics in terms of, you know, eating well, exercise, those type of things. You know, it can be helpful to reframe unhelpful thoughts sometimes. So, you know, for example, if you feel like your workload is too much, and, you know, it could be a negative thing, that maybe you could have a thought that, you know, your manager is trying to get at you or picking on you. You could reframe that and look at it as maybe your manager thinks you're really competent, and so therefore, you know, really needs your help and really finds you helpful. But that doesn't mean you don't have the conversation to kind of remedy the issue. It's just a more helpful way of thinking about things. So there's more than one way of sort of looking at things. And yeah, try to spend time with loved ones and friends. If you can, share with your manager. I mean, one of the things that really supported me in the last year was being really open and honest with my manager about my personal situation, so that those things could be supported and taken into account. And also approaching other people with kindness and an open mind really does help as well. And I think, you know, the other thing I would really want to kind of just emphasize is that it's okay not to be okay all of the time. And sometimes that's helpful for our children and young people to see that, because, you know, you're modeling to them that it's okay not to be okay all of the time, but, you know, you'll be there and you'll be present to support them. Next slide.
This is really talking about how we create opportunities for communication. So, you know, I think our children do benefit from a space to talk about feelings, talk about COVID, talk about schools, talk about pressures. It seems independent of COVID, the amount of pressure from schools and from society generally to perform is just increasing, and is at toxic levels now. Parents aren't always in the best position. Someone mentioned a teenage son at home. Parents aren't always best positioned to be able to have these conversations, but I just wanted to have a think. It's very small writing on this slide. If you can see some of the ideas, really, just to give you, you know, encouragement, really, that you can do things to increase that communication, and you can have that role. And I got here just a reminder, Barry Mason, who's was a great systemic thinker. He uses this equation for change, and he says, if you commit to experiment with doing things differently, and if you repeat that over time, then you can get that change. And I think that's been really important over COVID, isn't it? That we've had to do things differently. And some of the different things that people, you know, I've heard that people have found really useful is establishing sort of routines where they might be alongside their young person. You know, they might sit down and play a game with them, or they might go for a walk with them, or watch a horror movie together, and do that regularly, and use that time for that sort of opening up discussions, rather than that sort of, as you all know, that sort of face-to-face chance to talk. It is often not the best way. Using active listening. Actually, you know, someone said about the exhaustion, not being able to sort of be attentive to their young people, and really sort of, again, setting that in your mind, that trying to protect that time where you can tune into what they might be experiencing, think of them, and active listening. I'm going to leave these other things because they're things everybody is doing, yeah. I'm sure already, and we're running out of time.
And I just want to add, you know, yeah. the main point is, you know your children best. You know, you do know your children best. So, you know, you will have the tools and the skills to kind of engage your children already. These are just ideas that you can try when it is getting difficult. And another point I want to make is that, you know, the schools are recognizing the increased need for pastoral support and such. So, and the school will have loads of resources as well. So please do try to speak to the schools and ask them for support if needed. Next slide, please. Next slide, we'll leave this one out. Okay.
We'll leave out mindfulness.
The final,
how could we?
So the last point to kind of just make before we finish is that, you know, whilst it can be kind of easy to kind of look at everything in the context, and it is important to do so. It's really important not to ignore the signs that something more serious may be going on for some young people. So some of the signs that, you know, you should seek additional mental health support for a young person might include the following. I mean, it's there in terms of significant change in mood that's persistent, change in weight, if they're kind of persistently tired or lethargic, you know, anger in terms of, you know, angry outbursts that just seem out of character, or whether your child's kind of behaving secretive or you notice self-harming behaviors. The rest of the slides are just kind of resources and places that you can go to get more support if needed, and other things that you can try. So, I mean, we have run out of time, but if you can just spare a few moments to complete our feedback survey, we'd be really grateful. We're going to put the link in the chat so that you can access it there. We'd really, you know, welcome the feedback. And just to add, if you do want to get in contact with us, if you or someone you work with needs more support, or whether that's even for your team, please do contact us, and our email address where you so is at the end of this presentation, and you can also look at our website. Thanks, everybody. And any questions, you know, we're still here, so if you don't have to rush off.
I'm going to say thank you to those that are leaving, and farewell.
Thanks for engaging with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.